Good evening. I am Brad Usher, Senator Krueger's Chief of Staff. The legislative session is ending next week and there is a good deal of unfinished business, and Senator Krueger is still in a committee meeting but will be able to join us later to moderate the Q&A portion of the event. So I'm going to do the introductions. I would like to welcome program participants who are viewing on Zoom and Facebook or who are calling into our virtual town hall on skyrocketing utility costs, why my Con Ed bill is so high. As always, we have closed captioning of today's event. As a viewer, you have to activate closed captioning to view the text on your device. If you're in Zoom, click on the live transcript in the meeting controls to start viewing closed captioning. If you're in the Facebook Live event, you will see a settings button at the bottom right-hand corner of the video. Click Closed Caption CC to start viewing closed captioning. This forum is being recorded and everyone who RSVPs will receive an email with a link to the event and the resources that are posted in the chat within a few days after the event, along with the presenter's PowerPoint. Before we go to the program, we have a COVID update. In New York City, our COVID-19 alert level is now high or orange as of May 17th. This means that coronavirus cases and hospitalization rates are going up and putting substantial pressure on our healthcare systems. It is especially important to take extra precautions at this time. Additional details are being posted in the chat, and those will also be shared with participants after the event. I also wanted to share some thoughts from Senator Krueger regarding the horrific incidents of gun violence that rocked our state and nation in the last 2 weeks. This is quoting from Senator Krueger. 2 weeks ago, 14 Black New Yorkers were murdered in a supermarket by a white supremacist with an AR-15. This past weekend, a man was murdered on the subway by a complete stranger with a handgun. And 2 days ago, at least 19 elementary school children and 2 of their teachers were murdered by a teenager with an AR-15, which he bought legally just days beforehand. Words cannot express my anger, grief, and frustration at the level of gun violence in this country. It is a problem that is unique to this country, and it is a choice that is made by Republican leaders in Washington and in state capitals. They choose fear-mongering and NRA money over the lives of our children every time. Guns have now overtaken car crashes as the leading cause of death among American children. And 2/3 of the guns used in crime in New York State were bought into New York from other states with reckless and irresponsible gun laws. We must continue to do everything we can to strengthen and refine our gun laws in New York State, but at the end of the day, the epidemic of gun violence and mass murder can only be addressed at the federal level. This is a national crisis and it must not continue. And now we will move on to today's event. Most of you experienced sticker shock when you opened your Con Ed bills this year, Senator Krueger included. I know that some of you saw your utility bill double. If any of you are wondering why your utility bill went up so much, how Con Edison calculates the bill, or if you simply want to know what your rights are as a utility customer, many of your questions will be answered tonight. We are pleased to have 2 best-in-class presenters. Richard A. Berkley, the Executive Director of the Public Utility Law Project, and Laurie Wheelock, the Deputy General Counsel and Deputy Director at the PULP, the Public Utilities Law Project. We have a great deal of information to share tonight, so let's get to the presentation. Just to remind you before we start, we will have a Q&A session after the presentation. You can submit questions through the Q&A functions on Zoom or chat in Facebook. Now it is our pleasure to introduce Richard Berkley and Laurie Wheelock.
Thank you, Brad, and we're very pleased to be here on behalf of the Senator and her constituents, and of course to work with you and the rest of Senator Krueger's staff, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for some time. And I hope that everyone who is watching, the 100 or so that are on Zoom and whoever is on Facebook, that will be able to get to all of your questions, and that you will learn all the things to know why your bill went up and what your rights are at the end of this and what you can do. Let me pass to my co-presenter, Deputy General Counsel and Deputy Director Laurie Wheelock. Laurie?
Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laurie Wheelock, and we are the Public Utility Law Project. We go by PULP for short. We're a nonprofit organization based in Albany, New York, but we have an office in New York City, and we cover the entire state. Our presentation tonight is all about knowing what your utility rights are. And we're going to share information. Again, these slides will become publicly available through the Senator's office, and we'll do some questions and answers at the end. Again, our organization is a nonprofit, and our mission is to educate, advocate, and litigate on behalf of low-income utility customers. You can reach Richard and I through our email addresses here, but honestly, the most important information on this slide is our hotline number, the 877-669-2572 number. Call, leave your name and information. Our intake team will call you back. They will, give you some information about our group. We don't charge for our services, but we do need authorization forms, which the Senator's office can help get to you if you don't have a printer at home or you can't wait for it to come in the mail. But essentially, we can then work on your behalf with your utility to help resolve your issues that you have with them. Again, we have our mailing address at the bottom. When we do question and answer later, I just want to say a quick disclaimer. It's best not to share any confidential information or anything like your account number. If you have a very specific issue, it's best to call our hotline so that we can assist you one-on-one. But we will do some good Q&A at the end of tonight's presentation. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, Richard and I are going to start by really going over how the COVID-19 health pandemic and the economic downturn affected people's utilities. Having more usage at home, be it electric, gas, needing the internet, needing your phone, and honestly needing cable too. If you have it, to stay in touch with the news, these essential utilities really have been highlighted during the pandemic. And so we're going to talk about what has been going on, what protections there are because of the pandemic. And then we're going to talk about energy in general. In New York, we actually have some really strong consumer protections when it comes to electric and gas. So we're going to give you some quick tips on how to deal with those and what your rights are. We probably will not have time to go over telecommunications or water, but we do have slides that we've included in the presentation that will go out. And so again, if you have an issue with phone, internet, or water bill through Department of Environmental Protection in New York City, you can contact us for more information. We'd be happy to help you. So in New York State, we've seen people falling more and more behind on their utility bills during the pandemic. And right now, the arrears, which we call, undue, past due and unpaid bills, have started to skyrocket. As of April of this year, 1.26 million residential energy customers are behind on their bills by 60 days or more. That means that bill shows up at your house, you're unable to pay it, and after 60 days, the utility companies have to report how many people are behind and what the total is. And so the statewide total as of April was $1.89 billion that people owed when it came to electric and gas. Con Edison, just like all the other regulated utilities, provides monthly reports. And so that's how we're able to track and calculate this data of how far behind energy customers are. And so Con Ed specific numbers are extremely high. There are over 825 million customers behind, and that total is over 380,000 households are 60 days behind or more. And it just again shows you the mass number of Con Ed customers that are struggling right now. And again, these numbers are only for electric and gas. We don't know what the residential total is for water or for internet or for telephone right now in New York. If you're interested in seeing more and kind of going back and looking at Con Ed's numbers, the number at the bottom of the screen is the case number you can pull up at the Department of Public Services website. It's 91-M-0744, and you can check it and see what their monthly totals are. So again, energy in New York that's regulated is electric and gas. And so for the constituents watching tonight, that's Con Ed. You may have electricity with Con Ed, you may have natural gas for heating or potentially cooking as well. So we're going to start now by going over what consumer protections are out there. And we get a lot of questions when people fall behind on their Con Ed bills. And so the first thing we like to show is what a termination notice looks like. If you do get an e-bill, so an emailed bill, or you get something in the mail that looks like this is something that, should draw your attention to it. And you should definitely contact the company right away. It will tell you, how far behind you are. If you do have a termination date, there's usually a date attached to it, and then other information relating to how far you may be behind. And so we get a lot of questions from people saying, okay, well, I'm falling behind on my bills, but when am I at risk? And when potentially could I lose service? And so we like to start off with this slide by saying that the utility company just can't show up whenever and just shut off your service without notice. There are very specific consumer protections in place with, required deadlines that they have to follow. And in New York, for electric or gas to be shut off, the utility can't take any action for at least 35 days. So how do you get to those 35 days? Well, the first step is the utility can't act until your payment is at least 20 days past due. So I get a bill in the mail. I don't think I can pay it. The utility company can't do anything for at least 20 days from the date on my bill. The utility then must issue a final termination notice. That's that letter I showed just a minute ago at the stop sign. And that has to give me at least 15 days notice before I lose service. And so that's the 20 plus the 15, you get to 35 days. So that's a little bit of a time frame to show. Now, terminations just can't happen any time of day or night or on weekends. The law is very specific in New York that utilities cannot shut off between Monday and Thursday, or they can shut off Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 4. But what this means is while they can shut off during that time period, they cannot shut off after 4 or before 8 a.m. on a Friday, a public holiday, for instance, Monday being a federal holiday, they can't shut off. Any day the utility's main office is closed is really important. And also the 2 weeks around the winter holidays and the new year, there's also a little bit of a period of time where the utilities don't shut off. Now, Con Edison also has summer protections, which is really important. And we like to highlight that. In Con Edison's 2019 rate case, they actually came to an agreement because groups like PULP pushed them to have some summer temperature protections. So in Con Edison's territory, if it's 93 degrees or more, they will not shut off on the day before the forecasted 93-degree weather, and then 2 days after, because of the belief that there are heat islands, because of the pavement and the sidewalks, that the hot temperatures can really last for a long period of time, even after that 93-degree weather. So those are summer protections. Going back to the top, in New York, we also have some winter protections, but really they're more notice. So there's no moratorium on shut-offs during the winter. Some states do. For instance, Florida can't shut off in the winter. In New York, we don't have that. We have a heating season. So between November 1st and April 15th, which may sound familiar from leases and rental agreements, the companies have to do extra notices. So there's that original 35 days before they can act. Well, on top of that, they have to at least try and contact an adult resident by phone or in person at least 72 hours before they shut you off. And they're looking to see if there's someone in the home with like a medical emergency. They then also have to do another step. They have to try and contact someone, again, an adult, by phone or in person at the time they shut you off. And we have had cases where there's been no knock, there's been no phone call, and we've been able to file a complaint and get the service turned right back on again because this provision had been violated. So again, there's some extra notice during the winter time, and in the summer, which is coming, it's pretty much here, those 93-degree days are important because there won't be shut-offs the day before and 2 days after that as well. Now, the next slide is a checklist. This is something that I pull up. We do a lot of direct services at PULP. Again, people contact us when they get that termination notice, and we go through this and we talk with the individual. And for some people, maybe one of these or two of these bullet points helps them protect their account and prevents a termination. For others, it may be 3, 4, 5 bullet points. So Richard and I are going to go into more depth about these tonight. And again, we'll be sharing this slideshow with the senator's office for distribution. So the first thing we tell people when they call us and they say that they're falling behind and they're nervous that they might lose their electric or gas is that we encourage the customer to pay what they can when they can. And this has been particularly important, especially during the bill surge. We've heard stories where people are getting bills 2, 3 times the amount of money that was being charged the month before or even last year. And if you get that large bill and you can't pay it all, try to pay something. It helps to keep you in that monthly rhythm of paying, but it also helps you keep that balance as low as possible. And we know this can be hard, especially with everything going on right now. It can be hard, but if you can, just paying even a few dollars is really a good idea to try and keep that balance low. The next thing to do is contact the utility and ask. You can call Con Ed and ask them if there is a date scheduled, if so, what it is. And during that conversation, you can tell them, hey, I'm having this issue. We've heard from a lot of people, just even in the last couple of weeks, who have come down ill with COVID. They can't work. That means that they're not getting paid. And so we've encouraged them to call Con Ed and explain what's going on and ask for what's called a hold. You can ask them to hold your account for 30 days and just protect it to give you time to try and remedy your situation. The third step is financial assistance. If you are low income or even potentially moderate income, there are some existing resource programs through the HRA, Human Resource Administration, that's specifically for utility arrears, which we'll go over in a little bit. There's also some new programs because of the COVID-19 health pandemic. And so tonight we'll go over those in detail. Richard's going to talk about some medical issues. If there's serious medical conditions in your home, or you have someone on life-sustaining equipment, there's additional protections under the law, which he'll discuss in just a little bit. And another really good form of protection is a deferred payment agreement. And so you might get a letter from Con Edison in the mail that says, hey, Laurie, you're falling behind. Here's a payment agreement. And there may be terms that you can't afford. So we're going to discuss tonight what an affordable payment agreement looks like, how you can kind of negotiate those. And again, this is an area that our organization works with people all across the state, is to negotiate these agreements. The last bullet point is all about the complaint process with the Department of Public Service. And the department is the government entity that oversees Con Edison. And so if you're having an issue and you're struggling with any of these bullet points above, and you're unable to work with Con Edison, or you're having difficulty getting records or things of that nature, you can file a complaint with the department. And Richard and I will help explain what that process looks like. So that's this little checklist. And now we're going to go deeper into each one of these bullet points. So this checklist is all about the Home Energy Assistance Program. And so we're going to start by looking at some of the existing financial assistance programs out there for people who are behind on their energy bills. So again, Con Edison. And so HEAP, is a fantastic program. It's federal dollars that come to New York and are administered through HRA. Now, the HEAP program opens up in November of each year, and it did close last month. So if you didn't get to apply for HEAP this heating season, please make sure to put this on your radar, drop it on your calendar in early November, get that application from HRA, and apply. If you did receive HEAP, where you applied for HEAP and you're waiting, we know that there's a bit of a backlog right now. We've seen delays of 2 to 3 months sometimes in processing these applications. It's a good idea to follow up with HRA because there's other types of HEAP that you might be, qualified for. I almost think of HEAP as an umbrella. It's like if you apply for that first regular HEAP grant, there are additional programs underneath it. And so all of them are kind of, different depending on your situation. And the first is emergency HEAP. So you get a termination notice saying, okay, Laurie, you're going to lose your electric in 15 days. I already applied for HEAP, during the time period. I got it. I can call HRA back now, tell them I got a notice from Con Ed and ask them to put me into emergency HEAP. That program is open and it's going to be open until the end of August or until funds run out. So this is a good idea to call HRA. We've again heard about delays. So usually you have to leave a message, but if you don't hear from them, call back. Like every couple of days, keep calling and they will give you a ring back, or you can contact us and we'll help get you in touch with HRA. This next bullet point is really important. If for some reason heating is included in your rent, but you are paying Con Edison electric and that electricity is needed to run your thermostat. So the domestic electric emergency heat grant is a very narrow type. Again, they're almost like little brothers and sisters. And so this is a sister grant here. And this one is specifically for people who run their thermostat on electric. That electricity gets cut off and you can't run your thermostat. Hence why this HEAP grant is so important. Renters, you can also apply for HEAP, and that money will go onto your EBT card. Homeowners, if you have a furnace or a boiler and it breaks between October 1st of 2021 through September 31st of this year, you can contact HRA and apply for a fine-tune or replacement program grant, where they actually come in and they have they have people who fix, repair, or update your equipment. Cooling season has opened, so as of May 2nd, you can actually apply to get either a fan or an Energy Star air conditioning unit, and they also cover the expense to install it, which is fantastic. Through HRA, if you run out of these HEAP grants, you can also talk to them about emergency energy assistance, also known as like the one-shot, and that can help pay and also give you a guarantee period moving forward. Being in touch with us, as well as the senator's office, there could be local charity programs. For instance, trying to think of one right now, and I'm blanking, but Catholic Charities sometimes has them, and other groups in the district might have additional grants as well that we can get you in touch with. Con Edison also has a low-income bill discount program. This is something that our organization pushed for many years, is to help people who are low income with some sort of credit off their account every month. And as of about a month ago, they now have this application online. And so this is a link at the bottom of the screen. And what it is if you can, fill out the application, if you qualify already for any of these programs, HEAP, SNAP, if you're on SSI, Medicaid, Lifeline, any of these programs here, you get your awards letter. It says, okay, Laurie, you received HEAP this year, or you're on SSI. I submit that letter with my application and I get put into this program for a year. And every month I see credits coming off my Con Ed bill. I saw a woman this morning who's getting about $26 a month off of her Con Ed bill every single month for the next year. And that's been tremendously helpful for her and her family. So just wanted to flag that for everyone. And what we say with these programs, if you think you're eligible, apply. Worst comes to worst, you get denied. So definitely encourage you to take a look into that. Now, not only does Con Ed have their own program, and HRA has programs that we went over under the HEAP umbrella, but because of the pandemic, the state has also created programs specifically to help with arrears. And so one of these is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP. And so it was federal funds that came to New York. If you were or are behind on your rent and you apply for ERAP, there is a section, it's about on page 16 of the application, where you can also include your Con Ed account. And so they will look at and process the application and potentially help you pay your Con Ed bill if you applied for ERAP. Now, this program has had significant delays. We believe that they might be up to October 2021 applications right now, starting to process those. So we strongly encourage you to contact HRA and just ask for a status. Say, I applied for ERAP back in September. I haven't received any funds yet for my Con Ed bill. If you can get your application number, you can then call Con Ed and give it to them, and they actually put a hold on your account. We talked about that earlier. It's like a protective period of time where they will not shut you off. But it's really good to know that there are still delays with processing these, but that they will get to them is what we're being told. The next program is actually currently closed, but we like to flag it because we believe that there was more money in the state budget, and we're in touch with OTDA about whether or not this will open, and if so, when. And so if you already applied for HEAP, you received HEAP, you might be eligible for the regular arrears supplemental benefit, and it pays up to $10,000 for electric and gas. So, it's not open right now. We do believe there is money in the state budget, and we're in touch with the state about when this program will open up, but there's no application involved. You just call HRA and say that you want to be considered for this program, and then they'll review your situation, see if you will qualify. The last bullet point is something we're really excited about, and we thank Senator Krueger and all of her colleagues in the Senate and the Assembly, but there was actually like a line item in the budget that gave money to help people that are in the low income discount program. So for those customers that are considered in the low income bill discount program, there will be money coming by August 1st, straight through that program to help people that have been falling behind on their arrears. There's going to be a second wave of funding. The state's still trying to work out what that will look like for small businesses and moderate to higher income individuals. And so our organization will remain in touch with the senator, but we're really excited to see some debt relief come, particularly for low, moderate, and higher income individuals as well as businesses too. Another thing we like to flag is when you're getting through all these emergency programs and applying for financial assistance, there are some really great programs out there when it comes to energy efficiency. And this can be for tenants, this can be for homeowners, but the state's website through NYSERDA, this energy advisors, you can actually put in your address, your zip code, and it'll help come up with different programs that you may be eligible for. Empower, for instance, can come in. Again, if you're a tenant, you may need your landlord's approval, but tenants have been able to get the approval in some situations, or homeowners, they come in, they do an energy audit. They can give you LED light bulbs and things of that nature. And so again, by making your own unit efficient, you can help decrease your bill. And there are other programs like Solar for All, which again deal with bill discounts. You may actually get like a credit on your Con Ed bill that will help lower your bills on a monthly basis. So again, this website, definitely check it out and see what you might be eligible for. And we'll make sure that the senator's office has these slides. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Richard, who's going to start talking about some of the medical protections that are out there.
Thanks, Laurie. And I picked up all the Q&As up to this point in the presentation also. So if you want to add anything, just click on Q&A. So thanks everybody for showing up tonight. We really appreciate the chance to talk with you, and let me jump right in. So a serious or chronic medical condition is and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but the reason that we're talking to you about that and about life-sustaining equipment is if a customer, that is the person whose name the bill is in, or a household member of that customer, has a serious or chronic medical condition that can be aggravated by the termination of the heat or electric service, you can avert the shutoff by the company if the doctor calls the utility and tells them about that emergency medical condition. A telephone certification by your doctor is only good for 5 days, and it must be followed by a written certification, which we'll talk about in a second. A written certification of a serious or chronic medical condition is valid for 30 days and must contain the doctor's name, address, and state registration number. It must have the name and address of the utility customer and the nature of a serious illness or chronic medical condition. The doctor must also add a statement that that illness or condition will be aggravated by termination of the utility service, and they have to give reasons for why they make that conclusion as a doctor. Now, I want to be clear that a doctor's 30-day hold letter is only allowed to be renewed once under law, but as a practical matter, most of the utilities are flexible on this, and they'll let you go at least 3 times before they start pushing back a little bit on that. So here's an example of a medical letter that was rejected. As you can see, it's kind of a little bit sloppy. It doesn't look like it was written very well in the middle of the letter. So up at the top, it has the customer and their account number. We've redacted everything. We blacked it out to protect their confidentiality. But down below, there's just this very basic, oh, the person has asthma and they need electricity to administer her treatments. It doesn't meet the requirements of what we just talked through. And you can see down below, it does have the doctor's name, presumably, and license number, but they don't give a medical conclusion. They don't talk about in any length about the condition that we're talking about. And so this letter is rejected. The companies are very formulaic about that. They will reject as much as they can. And so you have to be very careful about towing the line on the letter. Life-sustaining equipment is something even more important than a serious or chronic medical condition. So you are a life-sustaining equipment customer if you or someone in your household relies upon electrically powered life-sustaining medical devices, so that if you lose electric power, you or the member of your household will die. So if service is shut off, you or someone in your household will die. And the result of that is that if you are on life-sustaining equipment, the company cannot shut you off, no matter how much money that you owe them. This creates problems potentially down the line, but for the time being, this is a complete protection for people who are called LSE, or life-sustaining equipment users. Now, we'll talk about deferred payment agreements, and they are the most powerful, in my opinion, piece of the Home Energy Fair Practices Act, which is New York's Consumer Bill of Rights for utility customers. And just to start out by giving you a fact or two, this law is 40 years old, and it was negotiated and asked for actually by the utilities. And they don't like it as much now, but I always say to them, look, if you don't like it, go to the legislature and ask them to change it. Good luck. So why is a DPA so important? It's a written agreement to pay unpaid bills, that is arrears, for past utility service over time. The law says that it must be in writing and signed by the customer and a representative of the utility. If it's not signed by both, it is not a legal deferred payment agreement. They may require you to do a down payment on your back arrears, but a deferred payment agreement must, by law, again, 40-year-old law, it must be tailored to a customer's individual financial circumstances, which means they have to negotiate with you to figure out what your circumstances are. The lowest agreement, or it's called a minimum agreement by utilities and by the state regulator, is $0 down in your back arrears, no matter how much they are, and $10 a month going forward, plus your current electric and gas bill. And so if that is all you can afford, that's all you have to pay, no matter how long it takes to pay off your back arrears. We've negotiated 20, 27, 30, 40, 90-year agreements during the pandemic. Now, there, as Laurie pointed out, thanks to the forward-looking proactive action by the state legislature and by the governor, we have several $100 million in the budget to begin addressing customers' arrears all around the state, and so that will help out. But you still have this idea of a deferred payment agreement, which is incredibly powerful. It can be amended if your financial circumstances change for the worse. And if the company is pushing back and not negotiating with you in good faith, you can pick up the phone, call the Department of Public Service hotline and complaint line, and they will have to help you negotiate your bill. Finally, if they don't help you, we will. So here's the complaint process, since we've talked a little bit about complaining to the Department of Public Service. A number of years ago, they set up this system which works like this. First thing is, you need to complain to the utility, and the likelihood is that you won't get the answer that you think you should get. At that point, you call the complaint line, 800-342-3377 at the Department of Public Service, or we suggest that you file a complaint online if you have internet access, and that way you have a copy of your complaint. If you do it on a telephone, as you know, most attorneys will tell you, put everything in writing. When they hang up the phone with you, they forget instantly. So most initial complaints, that is your second telephone call about the problem, are not investigated by the department. Instead, they are referred back to the utility with direction to review the complaint and respond within a definite time period. If the complaint is related to either establishing service or getting service turned back on after a shutoff, the utility must contact you within 2 business hours. If the complaint is related to a non-emergency matter, such as billing or something else, the utility must contact you by the close of the following business day. Now, even with that, it might not come out the way that you want, and then you go back to the Department of Public Service. You can appeal that initial action by the utility, and you ask them to do their own investigation And you can ask for what's called an informal hearing or an informal review. We always tell people ask for an informal hearing because it is a hearing examiner that is a judge at the Department of Public Service, you and the utility. They have to tell you no to your face if they disagree with your description of the problem and what the company should do. Now, the reason that we always say do an informal hearing is an informal review is just a review on paper submitted by you and the utility. We always tell people it's very easy to say no to a pile of paper. It's quite a bit harder to say no to someone who's looking at you. Again, this might not come out the way that you want, and so you are given the opportunity to appeal within 15 days in writing to the Public Service Commission. That is 7 individual people who have been selected and appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And they pause in their monthly meeting and they consider your issue, and then they give you their decision at that moment in time. They might not get it wrong, they might not get it right also, and so you have the ability to file within 30 days a petition for reconsideration or rehearing. And if that comes out the wrong direction also, you have a chance to sue the Public Service Commission and the utility in court, and that is something called an Article 78, which is a special way to sue government. Quite often, and we're seeing a lot more of this during COVID, the landlord is someone who is responsible for the heat, the common heat for the building, or the common lights for the building, maybe the electric to run the elevator. And because they have been felt aggrieved during the pandemic with not being able to throw people out, the landlords have been trying to get money in whatever way they can. And one of these ways is if they stop paying the common energy accounts for the building, people, feel like they have to leave because there's no heat, there's no light, they can't get up and down the elevator. But you have some protection under the law again, which is Con Edison is required to notify tenants in the building that the landlord's account is at risk of termination. At that point in time, what you do is you contact the landlord or your management company and you ask them what is their plan to pay up. And we point out here, the landlord can get a DPA, that is a deferred payment agreement, with Con Edison also. We suggest that when you talk to Con Edison, you request updates on the status of the landlord's account and whatever their plan to get out of arrears is, so that the landlord doesn't just yes you to death and then nothing happens and you end up having your building shut down. Tenants can also form a tenants association, open a new utility account in the tenant association name. And I want to be very clear with you that when you do that, you are not responsible for all the back unpaid bills of the landlord, no matter what they say, no matter if the company or if the Department of Public Service gets it wrong. When you form that account in the tenants association name under the real property law, your account starts brand new with no arrears, no unpaid bills at all. Then you pay the utility bill, you, the tenants association, and you deduct payments made from your rent. We always suggest that when you're going to do something like that, the first thing to do is get a legal services or legal aid attorney, talk to a housing association, and then speak to your senator, your assembly member, your New York City council member, and tell them what you're doing and ask them to stay in the loop so that they can help you, because they all want to help you, but they can't if they don't know what's going on. If service is lost, most buildings in New York City have some regulatory oversight by the Housing Preservation and Development, or HPD, agency of the city. And so they may be able to force the lights back on. They may be able to take over the service of the building. If that doesn't work, there's also Article 7A of the RPAPL. Your housing attorney or your legal aid or legal services attorney will tell you about that, but they can take over the building entirely and create a nonprofit entity to run the building and finally get all the repairs and all the bills paid and all that stuff that you have been complaining about, most likely for many years, like all of us who lived in New York City have complained at one time or another. So let me talk a little bit about the bill surge. Your Con Edison bill, since 1998, when the Public Service Commission restructured, or call it deregulated, the energy markets in New York, you have 2 sections on your bill. The first one is something called the delivery section. And the delivery section of your utility bill is the only section of your utility bill that is completely under the control of the utility. In 2019, the Public Service Commission, the state regulator, approved a 3-year rate increase for Con Ed Rates went up every year. The most recent increase was January 2022, 3 weeks before the bill surge, and that was the last in the 3-year rate plan that they got in 2019. And by the way, they filed another request for a massive rate increase the end of this January, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The other part of the bill, which is really what was deregulated, is something called the supply section of the bill. And in that case, that is the supply of natural gas, which Con Edison buys at an auction market down in Louisiana, mostly, or it is a electric supply that they buy at an auction market at something called the New York Independent System Operator. We have our own auction market for electricity in the state. The thing that's important is that those commodity prices went up a huge amount. And in New York City, well, first of all, for the state of New York as a whole, about 45% of our electricity is generated by burning natural gas. So when the price of natural gas goes up, which it did starting in October of this year, the cost of electricity also goes up. In New York City, almost 90% of the electricity in New York City is created by burning natural gas. So almost twice as high a percentage as the rest of the state. The important thing here is that the energy companies are required by law to forecast and plan when they believe costs will go up, and they have to act to do something which is called hedge, which is, think of it as buying an insurance policy to protect you, the customer, from unreasonable and rapid increases in the cost of energy. Back in October of 2021, the federal government, the Energy Information Administration, warned all the states and all the utilities and all the regulators in all the states that if this winter that is just ending was as warm as last winter, that the cost of natural gas would go up between 20 and 40%. The cost of fuel oil would go up between 30 and 45 or 50%. And the cost of propane would go up potentially as much as 90%. As we all know, this January, February, and March were far colder than last year, and the costs of all of those things went up dramatically. For me, for example, my energy bill, my electric bill is triple what it was last year for January, February, March, and April. And for most of you, the people that we've talked to in the city, it's double or triple depending on what your situation is. So you may have talked to the Department of Public Service or the utility, and they said, not our fault, not our fault, nothing we can do. We have been all along telling you what you can do and telling your elected officials what they can do to represent you in this circumstance, and not just, cop out and say there's nothing that can be done. The first thing is file a complaint with the Department of Public Service and tell them that your Con Edison bill has skyrocketed, and tell them that they need to investigate the company. Again, the 800 number, 800-342-3377. There's also, again, that link to file complaints online. We also suggest to everyone who has been harmed financially by the bill surge in Con Edison territory to submit a public comment into Con Edison's rate case that they filed on January 28th of this year. We provide you with that link, and you don't have to write it down. Now, again, we'll make these slides available to Senator Krueger and her staff, and they'll have that for you, and you'll be able to get a copy. But put a public comment in the Con Ed rate case, because this needs to be heard in that rate case, because Con Edison asked for $1.7 billion of new increased costs. And everyone needs to know, the regulator needs to know, the company needs to know what's happened to you. There are multiple investigations ongoing into the bill surge. The Senate Committee on Investigations and Government Operations is investigating billing practices and price surges on all of the 7 major utilities, including Con Edison. The New York State Attorney General is investigating Con Edison, and actually, for the first time in more than a decade, the Attorney General has entered into a major rate case in New York, and so her office is in the Con Edison rate case. In addition, the Department of Public Service, that is the regulator, is investigating all energy utilities in the state of New York. Although, because Con Edison billing before all the other companies was the first to create a crisis around the bill surge, and also because New York City and Westchester's congressional delegation wrote to the governor and to the regulator and told them that they must do something about this incredible surge in prices for people who had not recovered from COVID, the Department of Public Service is focused primarily on Con Edison in this investigation. The Con Edison rate case, as I said, was filed on January 28th. The case numbers are 22E0064, 22G0065. If you click on this link when you get the slides, it'll show you what's in there. I looked, I think Monday, there are only several hundred complaints. We should have thousands if the complaints are going to tip the scales at the Public Service Commission and the Department of Public Service. As I said, they're asking for $1.7 billion of increased prices, $1.2 billion in electric, $500 million in gas. This will increase your total bill, which is the supply charge plus the delivery charge, by 11.2% on the electric side and 18.2% on the gas side for 1 year, and then some unknown amount over 3 years. To put this in perspective, the total bill is always lower than the delivery increase because they average in the price of natural gas, which since 2011 has not gone up with the exception of this winter, but it has been at 50-year lows pretty much since 2011. The increase, if you look only at the delivery bill, which is what I said is controlled entirely by the company, it's over 18% for electric bills and over 28% for natural gas bills in the first year of the rate case. And then we will find out as we get to the negotiations how much more it will be over the following years. The company is doing a great deal of things, some of which is about reliability, some of which is about safety. They're also going to build some more renewables. They're going to do some more things to expedite the ability of electric vehicles to be charged all over their territory in Westchester and New York City. One of the important things that we think the company is doing is they're going to begin building large-scale solar that will be designed to offset some of the costs for low-income households in Westchester and New York City. The important thing about this, and there's tons you can find out, but we have a link here to file a comment in that rate case because it's important to have your voice be heard. If you think this increase is too much, given the amount that New York City has suffered during COVID, you should say that. If you can't afford it, if you are one of the seniors who, for the first time in years, have had an increase in Social Security, 6 and a little bit more percent, you need to say that. If you can't afford this, you have to tell the regulator. It's their job to listen. And one last thing is, of course, we are in that rate case. That is the Public Utility Law Project. We are representing all low and fixed income residents of New York City, customers of Con Edison in New York City and Westchester. And so we are fighting for you. We will look at your comments in the case, and we are happy to help as always. And as Laurie said, we're going to skip talking about telecom now and about water. The most important thing to know is if you are a homeowner, and there's a certain amount of homeowners in the senator's district, at the beginning of this year, that is December 31st of 2021, there was more than 600 million in 60 days or more unpaid water bills in the city. And that's probably about half of what the whole state owes at this point in time. So let's stop talking by ourselves and then welcome the senator in. I saw she joined us and she will work to moderate the question and answer. Hi, Senator, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Hi, everybody. And I do apologize for jumping on late. I was on another fairly complex meetings and I just couldn't get out of those fast enough. So I know that Brad started us off and did everything that I would have done if I was here early. I want to thank Laurie and Richard for their presentation, and I was here to listen to quite a bit of it. We have many questions that people submitted before the event, but if you have additional questions that are broad-based, you can put them into the chat, whether you're on Zoom or Facebook. But if you have questions that really relate more specifically to your building or your personal account with the utility, the best approach is for you to call PULP at their hotline number tomorrow, not tonight, tomorrow, 877-669-2572. And that number is also in chat and also with the resources that we're going to get out to whoever's here with us tonight. Again, just to remind you, you'll get an email with a list of all the resources that has been put in the chat and otherwise available through PULP. So thank you very much. And really thank you for being with us tonight. And now we're going to start with some of the questions that we got ahead of time, as I think additional ones will be building up in the chat. And again, you can still type into the Q&A functions, excuse me, on Zoom or Facebook. And then they'll send them to me via chat. That's how that works. I knew I was saying something wrong. All right, so just pulling up the questions that are already here. Are co-ops required to allow individual shareholders to participate in an ESCO? My board won't allow me to, even though we don't have a bulk rate agreement with Con Ed. I know I'm always very nervous about ESCOs to start, but let me turn it over to the two of you.
Okay, if you don't mind, Laurie, I'll grab this one. So, like the senator, we believe that ESCO should be avoided at all costs. We've done a number of investigations going back to 2012. We have never seen large numbers of people to benefit from getting service as a residential customer from ESCOs. Mostly what happens is you may get a slight discount at the beginning, but then they nab you with the small print and your rates triple or quadruple later on. The co-ops are probably trying to protect against potential financial problems for all the other owners by stopping you from using ESCOs, that is competitive suppliers. But the most important thing to know is that if you are a low-income household, there are only 10 out of 216 ESCOs in the state of New York that have been qualified by the Department of Public Service to serve you and that are not going to rip you off. And yes, I said that, and are happy to say it to the ESCOs. I've been saying it to them for years. If you are in better financial situation, you should avoid the ESCOs because they just charge more than the utility does. And we have analyzed hundreds of millions of consumer bills over the last decade. And again, less than 5% of people in the whole state have been able to do any benefit from residential ESCO service.
That's my experience. But there's another question that's perfect follow-up. So can I get off of an ESCO if I've been on one?
Counsel?
Yes. So the first thing you should do is contact your ESCO and tell them that you want to cancel your contract and that you don't want to pay for any of the charges or fees or anything that is associated. If they give you a hard time, if they are going to threaten, to put different fees or fines on, you can file a complaint with the Department of Public Service and they can assist you with getting them removed from your account. And you can also contact us. We do a lot of investigations. We actually get copies of the contracts. We can get copies of phone conversations between you and the ESCO and see if there's any, bad behavior on their part. We've been really successful in getting overcharges returned to customers. And on average, we've seen people get charged over $1,000 a year by the ESCO versus what their, utility would have paid. So look at your bill tonight or tomorrow. If you see something on there, it's usually on the third page of your Con Ed bill. It'll say, under the supply, if you see you have an ESCO, you've never talked to anyone and it got on there, you can definitely get them off and contact us. We'd be happy to help you do that process as well.
Great, thank you. So here's 3 separate questions, but they all interrelate. So I'm just going to do the 3 of them and for you to think about how to answer a group. So is there really an explanation for the large fluctuations I see from month to month? For example, this is a different question. Our utility bill was incredibly high for the 2 years of COVID when no one was here. We even unplugged all our equipment. Our landlord checked to make sure the power wasn't being pulled by another space, yet it's still high and nobody could explain this to us. Somebody, can you explain this to us? And then the last one that was very parallel was we left town. We even turned our breakers to off mode. How can these rates be so high? What's the explanation for all these stories?
So thank you. Those are 3 very good questions. Let me start with the one in the middle, which actually leads into the second question because it actually involves a test. So the second question is essentially, if you are gone and you're not using any power and your bills are still high, there are two things that you have a legal right to do in the state of New York, again, under this 40-year-old law that was advanced by the Senate and the Assembly back then. The first one is that you can request a test of what's called a fast meter. Now, that's worth doing, but our experience is that you rarely find that. And so the second thing that you can do, which is the one that you're more likely to find, particularly if you're living in an area that has been gentrified recently, or you're living in a formerly owner-occupied building, is that you may have something called a shared meter situation, which is where you are paying for some of the electric or gas that is being provided to other apartments or other parts of the building that are not under your control. That is illegal in New York State. It has been illegal since the 1930s. And when you report that to the company and tell them that you want a shared meter investigation, and you know what attorneys are like, we all do, and I'm allowed to say that as an attorney, you have to use the magic words. You have to say, I want a shared meter investigation. The company then has a very clear set of things that it must do within a certain set of timelines. And the first thing they do is they call up your landlord and they say, you have to let us, Con Edison, in to test for shared meter. If the landlord doesn't allow Con Edison to come in, a legal presumption is created that the landlord is the one who created the shared meter, or they know about it, and they end up having the bill transferred into their name. And so a shared meter investigation is extremely powerful. We ask for these all the time. And the first thing that they do, and that's why I said 2 and 3 are linked together, Senator, is that when Con Edison comes in to test for a shared meter, the first thing that they do is they shut off all your breakers to see if your electric meter is still moving. Because if all of your things in your apartment are off, all your breakers are off, and you're still getting electric or gas usage, then someone else outside of your apartment is using it. And that's the first thing they do. The second thing they do is they do an analysis of what all your appliances are and how many things run on gas. Do you have a gas burning fireplace or all that kind of stuff? And they try and figure out how much of the usage is attributable to you and how much to a third party. And then the landlord has to make good on that. And so they have to provide credits, and we've gotten thousands of dollars in credits to people. Do you want to grab question number 1, Laurie, or do you want me to jump on that one too?
So it's the
Sure.
large fluctuations from month to month.
Yeah.
And I guess really quickly to piggyback off of what Richard said as well, we noticed a pattern of behavior during the pandemic that really was a Con Ed specific issue when it came to bills. And so during that first, year of the pandemic in 2020, Con Edison wasn't sending their employees in to read meters. So a lot of people were getting estimated bills. And then by August of last year, they started to go in again. They were reading meters, and then they were also doing smart meter installations. So that means that all of a sudden they got an actual read. And because people had been home for a good chunk of the pandemic, a lot of seniors were home, sheltering in place, children doing virtual classes, things like that, it means your usage was a lot higher than the estimate. So we've seen that pattern. It's been very difficult for people. And again, it's something I just want to flag. You can go back and look at your bills and see if there's an E on your bill for estimate or an A, meaning an actual read. And that could be part of the reason why the bill was so high during COVID. As far as fluctuation, yes, to some degree. So again, there's the 2 portions of your bill. There's the demand portion, the supply portion, depending on what the cost of fuel is that Con Edison purchases on, that day or the date that they're being billed. That will be different than potentially, your neighbor across the street and the fuel being bought on that day and the bill being generated on that day. So there's fluctuations with the market. And then what we typically like to look for with customers is the seasonal change. So right now we're almost kind of in this sweet spot where heating season's over, it's lighter out. You should be using less electricity, hopefully at home. But as we know, the hot days are coming. They've already been here for some of us. And so air conditioning use is going to start. And so we're going to see your electricity go up. In the fall, it comes down again. And it, starts to go up in the winter as well. So there's natural fluctuation sometimes because of the market. There's fluctuation depending on the month, the year, the temperature. And so there could be different reasons why your bill is different from the prior month, and not to mention from the year before.
Okay, so here's 2 that I think fit together nicely also. Um, are there some parts of the day or night that are less expensive to use electricity than other times? And then if I'm sort of trying to plan around that, can I figure out how much electric costs are per minute or hour? For example, how much would I be spending by having an air conditioner on per hour, or a TV on per hour, or your computer on per hour? Is there ways for people to try to self budget to use utilities most efficiently for themselves?
Okay, so the first part of the answer to that is many years ago, for those of you who are old enough in the audience to remember the end of the 1970s, in New York, we had this stuff called time of use rates when electricity was cheaper at night. And so all the politicians, all the utilities said, run your washing machine at night, you know, don't you do all this stuff during the day. It was a disaster, quite honestly. People got hammered and bad things happened all over the state.
Mhm.
So what happened was is that the legislature decided that time of use rates in New York should only be voluntary. So you can voluntarily ask Con Edison to enter into what is called time of use rates, where during the heaviest usage parts of the day, which is like the 2 hours between waking up and going to work, during the afternoon, and then at night when everybody comes home and cranks on everything in their apartment or house at the same time, those are more expensive. In the middle of the night, energy is cheaper. And Con Edison will tell you, and you can look on their website in their tariff, and we'll show you how to get. We'll send a link to the senators folks on that. But you can look, and they'll tell you what the average prices are during those time periods. If you have a smart meter, or if you have your own Nest thermostat or some other kind of smart thermostat, you can collect all this data. You can figure out when you're using the most power. And Con Edison, again, will tell you what your usage is like. A Nest thermostat or a smart meter can tell you the increase of use that you have when you have a big new TV, which uses a huge amount of electricity, or if you have a super fancy high-speed stove or giant microwave or whatever. There are things in our lives that use a lot of electricity or a lot of gas, and you can plan that. You can also go on the internet. You can find approximations, but the best way to know what your usage is to get a smart meter in your house and then figure out how to attach to it with the apps for your phone if you have a smartphone, or get a smart thermostat, which will also tell you a certain amount of your usage, and you can figure it out that way. There's no one else doing it for you. In other words, it's all on the consumers. And thanks for putting that in the chat, Laurie.
Great, thank you. So obviously everybody's very conscientious about looking at their bills and are so confused by them. But a number of different questions about the differences between usage charges and then delivery charges and fees, where people are saying that the delivery charges and fees are radically higher than the usage charges. And does Con Ed just have the freedom to just split up those and increase one if they can't increase the other? How's that working?
I mean, if you mind if I start on this one, Laurie, and then you jump in when you want. So 1998, the state's Public Service Commission deregulated on its own account the energy system in New York. We're the only state in the United States where the legislature was not involved in deregulation because it was Enron's idea and the legislature was too smart for that, but the Public Service Commission went along with it back then. And so there is virtually no regulatory control over supply, but supply is affected by the world marketplace. In the US, because of gas fracking, which you all have heard of, the cost of natural gas went from $14 a therm in 2009 to under $1 by 2011. And so there was a crash in the price of natural gas that has persisted through to now, with some seasonal exceptions and during the first and second polar vortexes and stuff like that. I would also point out, by the way, that the war in Europe and the Ukraine is more than a bit about natural gas, and that has affected the world natural gas, gasoline, kerosene, fuel oil, and propane markets. And so you should expect the cost of all energy to be much higher than normal for at least the next year, perhaps longer. It depends on how long it takes there. As Laurie said, this is normally the time of year when the cost of energy goes down because we all use less of it, and so it responds to the market demand. But that is not what's going on now in the world. The delivery charges, again, are completely controlled by the company. So this major rate case that we're in right now with Con Edison is all about figuring out how much they will increase their delivery rates by. They will increase them, if they get what they want, they will increase them by enough to give them an extra $1.7 billion in the next year and much more over the next 3 years. So what happens is that some elected officials get involved, organizations like PULP, AARP gets involved, other consumer groups get involved, and we fight to try and hold down as much as possible the increases that they will be subsequently granted by the regulator. So Con Ed doesn't just make this up, there's a whole process. The city of New York gets involved in all these cases on behalf of the citizens of the city. But one problem for the city of New York is that they are a massive consumer of electricity. And so sometimes their interest as a consumer of energy runs against their interest to protect you, the citizenry. And in that case, you get sold down the river by the city, which is what happened with the smart meter nonsense in New York City 3 years ago, which added more than $2 billion to people's bills alone just for the smart meters. And I hope that answers the question. Do you want to jump in on that at all, Laurie, or did I overtalk?
No, I think it's particularly frustrating. We go over people's bills with you and we can show you where all these different charges are. But Richard, I feel like when I started at PULP, the way to explain it is it's like you drive up to the gas pump and they charge you $20 before you even get to pump the gas. There's all these different fixed charges and they go to different things like the lines and the repairs and things like that. And our organization does try to work to roll those back because we understand they're significant and can be a real financial strain on people.
Yep. And since we're talking even a little bit about the Con Edison rate case, we are going to fight to extend and expand the protection of vulnerable seniors and low-income households to get an air conditioning rate and to protect them during the summer, the hottest parts of the summer. We will extend and expand the protection against shutoffs for inability to pay your electric bill during during the cooling season. And we'll fight for a number of other things that are necessary for your everyday New Yorker, who quite honestly, as we all know, can barely pay their bills as it is. New York City has not recovered fully from COVID, despite everything that we might like in our heart of hearts. It just ain't true. And no amount of swagger is going to make it possible. It's going to take more jobs, and it's going to take helping people who are in distress at this point in time.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so a bunch of questions that all relate to the fact that, so we know now that ESCOs aren't really going to save us money. Are there other ways that we can get cheaper energy for ourselves? Are there different options than Con Ed, alternative power suppliers, alternative energy models? I mean, we live here in Manhattan, so the ability for very many of us to put solar panels on our roofs is not that realistic for us. So, are we just stuck with the reality of Con Ed for our energy, or is there something we should be thinking about?
So it's a complicated answer, and so let me start one thing at a time and then jump in where you want, Laurie. So you were able to get involved in what are called community distributed generation, which is, despite the fact that there's no space for solar panels in New York City, pretty much except Fresh Kills, maybe a couple of places in the Bronx, that's about it. Maybe underneath the Triborough Bridge, or next to it, but not enough. So what you can do is you can buy like a cooperative, or you can just join a distributed generation, which is a giant solar array somewhere else in New York State that will lower your cost of electricity because you're generating cheaper solar at some other part of the state. And that is worked out between the utilities and the owner, that is the promoter of the distributed generation. That's one of the easiest things you can do is a Manhattan from 125th Street south, where there's not much space left in the built environment in the city. There's little bits north of that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you're low income, you can join what's called Solar for All, which is a statewide program funded by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, otherwise known as NYSERDA. That will guarantee income eligible households a 10% discount on your energy bills forever. And what they do is they sign you up for a NYSERDA built or a Power Authority built solar array, and they discount the cost of your energy going forward. Con Edison is a monopoly. The utility business tends to be monopolies for a whole bunch of historic reasons and economic reasons. So there are very few options actually with Con Edison. One option, as I'm sure you all have heard, is to take the company over and to turn it into a publicly, that is owned by the public, a municipal utility. That would be a very difficult endeavor for Con Edison. It is an extremely valuable company. Just the electric and gas part is worth about $70 billion. And so you have to buy it. You can't just take it for free. We don't do that in the United States. So you would have to buy it, and that would mean bonding. The city of New York would have to put out bonds, and or the state would have to put out bonds. If you look at Long Island, where that was done to retire the debt of the nuclear plant, that was only open for 10 minutes, but that was enough to force the customers to pay for it. They got in debt for $7 billion, and that was back in Mario Cuomo's administration. They're still paying for that. So while it is possible to turn a company like Con Edison into a municipal utility, it's very expensive. And we don't really give an opinion on this other than to say municipal utilities in other parts of the country, for various reasons at various times, are much cheaper and better than investor-owned utilities. If you're going to decide that you want to take over a Con Edison or a National Grid New York City, first you have to realize that you're buying all the things that you're complaining about. And so you have to make sure that you have a plan to deal with all the things that have angered you about the utility forever. The second thing is you have to bring in forensic accountants, and they have to go over every piece of every book for at least 20 years to make sure that there's not money being hidden, that there's not things that you've never been told about. In other words, you have to know what you're buying to protect the public's finances. And then, the last thing is you have to have someone who will negotiate a good purchase price for you. That is all possible, but my personal opinion is don't hold your breath with Con Edison. The thing that needs to be done is that the state has to invest proactively, responsibly, but in a hurry, in building renewables to replace all the fossil fuels that we have now. Now, I want to be 100% candid about this, even though my lights are off here. We're in the country, so no lights. The process of building all these renewables is incredibly expensive. So building renewables is not going to lower anyone's bills. They're all going to go up in the near future. And what I always tell people is we're New Yorkers. We understand. The rest of the country doesn't necessarily understand, but we understand building for our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. Building renewables is the future for all of our families, children and grandchildren. It's the future for the state that we all love. But don't make the mistake of thinking it'll be cheaper now. It will be much cheaper in the future. But for the time being, we're going to have to invest, and it's going to be hard. You want to jump in, Laurie? I mean, that's pretty much what we usually say to people.
No, I think you got it.
All right, and actually you were answering quite a few questions about why can't we just take over these utilities and force them to lower the costs, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate that. Smart meters. So New York City seems to be making people get them, but apparently some people have figured out how to refuse them, but they're getting charged $9.50, I guess it's a month. And why should that be the case? And people pointing out that when they went to smart meters, suddenly their costs skyrocketed and they don't understand that. So maybe you addressed this earlier before I got on, but there seemed to be a bunch of questions about the good, the bad, and the ugly that is smart meters.
So I'll be candid with you because I believe in that. It saves a lot of time. Smart meters are a waste of money for consumers, plain and simple. PULP has fought against smart meters for many years, since the Obama administration. The state agreed with us back in the Obama administration that smart meters had no value for consumers. They have subsequently changed their mind. But in the city of New York, the cost of rolling out 100% smart meters, which by the way, we fought against and the city of New York supported, added more than $2 billion to your energy bills in the city of New York. And not just $2 billion once, but these things are paid for over 20 years. So your energy bills went up a lot for 20 years because of those. One of the things that came about because of our fighting against the smart meters and other places, you may have all heard of the town of Woodstock. They actually were the only municipality to beat the smart meters completely. If you don't want to get a smart meter, the cost benefit analysis under which smart meters were granted by the regulator took into account the fact that they would no longer be paying people to come and read your meter. And that was part of the savings that got them to agree to that. So in order to keep that cost benefit analysis working, when you opt out of getting a smart meter, you were charged for the truck roll, that is for the person to come and read your meter, which used to be invisible to you before, but now that everybody else is not having someone come and read the meter anymore, that $9.50 is showing up for you. And so we don't like smart meters. We don't think they're of any value. Much of what they are said to provide in benefits are provided by 1970s technology. And if you really want to know how much energy you use, you don't need an expensive smart meter that you're paying for a generation. You can just have a Nest thermostat or some other smart thermostat. Did I miss anything in that question, Senator?
No, I think you really covered it. There's many variations on the smart meter problems, just that came in questions about smart meters having been supposedly put in, and then learning that Con Ed said, oh, you get money back now. And then later on, Con Ed going, oh, we never turned the meter on, so we were wrong. So now we owe you everything back. Now you owe us everything back again. Story about not being able to get in to read the meter because the landlord's not cooperating, and then you're having to get into fights around that. Being told the wrong meter was put in, like you should know about that as a tenant in a building and be responsible for somebody else putting in a wrong meter versus a right meter. So there's lots and lots and lots of concerns, but I'm getting the sense there's not a lot of easy answers for us at this point.
And I think too, with the smart meters, again, go with your gut. And so if people are experiencing issues, contact the utility, ask for it to be tested. If they refuse, or again, you are adamant that there's something wrong, you can file a complaint with the Department of Public Service. We've had a couple of cases in Brooklyn where they put in the smart meter, but then switched which unit the meter was for. And so we had a senior citizen living by herself who was getting charged for the smart meter next door that was a family of 5. And so things happen, so go with your gut. File complaints. And again, our group is here. We'd be happy to look at bills and try to figure out what's going on.
Great. So I never heard this one before. Con Ed charges for the plugs that you have plugged into your outlets, even if the device is not turned on. So if the plug is repeatedly unplugged and plugged throughout the day, is that going to save you money or cost you money or change your bill at all?
So I'm going to reveal that I'm old in answering this. Some of you folks listening in, obviously no one else except me on this Zoom call is old enough to remember this, but when I was a kid, when you turned the TV set on, it made a little noise and then a little white dot came on in the middle. And then a little bit later, suddenly the picture showed up. And now we're all used to TVs that turn on instantly. And the simple fact of the matter is that the TV set is on partially all the time while it's plugged in. So it's always using power. And you have a lot of other things that are always using a little bit of power in your house. So yes, there are appliances, many of them in your house, stereos, the cable box, a good example. All the chargers for all the electronic devices you have are always using electric all the time. Now, you may from time to time get an offer from Con Edison, or if you also have a country house from Central Hudson or National Grid or wherever, that says, here is a smart surge suppressor that you can turn off all these things and just push one button and turn off everything that's using power all the time. So yes, if you were to unplug them, you would save money. The suggestion is that there are many of these smart surge suppressors. They have different colored outlets, like the green outlets are the ones that when you push the button, they'll all shut off. There's usually one of them that has to stay on all the time. I don't know if it's the cable box or whatever, but there's some like instructions, but you can save quite a bit. Those little, you call them wall vampires or whatever, they use quite a bit of power when they're not charging your phone, your iPad, if you're one of those people that has Android devices, not me, obviously, but all those devices use a lot of power and you can save a lot of money that way.
Thank you. So now I'm going to try to start with some of the chat questions that have come in. So there was some discussion about programs for discounts for elderly people and for low-income people. What if you're a disabled person?
So there are no special discounts for non-military service disabled people. Some of the utilities have a discount for active duty and former military, that is veterans. Con Edison doesn't have those now. They've had them in the past. My understanding is that it's possible that AARP will work with PULP to try and get a senior rate. And I also believe that there are some of your colleagues in the legislature, Senator, who have put in legislation to create a senior rate for all the utilities, because we want to take care of our greatest generation as a state. We understand, again, our values suggest we have to do that. If the legislature believes that it's important to do disabled rates, then the utilities will just have to do it. And what'll happen is we'll work out what that means and how that is afforded and what does disabled mean. Is it traumatic brain injury? Is it, physically disabled, or all the other categories? All those things are valuable. And particularly as the cost of this goes up, it's a discussion we have to have as a state. Again, we have to live up to our values, but sometimes we have to know what they are before we can do that.
And did you touch on HEAP and emergency energy benefits at all before I was able to join tonight? You did. Good. So I'm not even asking about that. Do we know of any discounted energy prices for not-for-profit organizations serving low-income people, for the groups themselves?
So again, depending on the utility, not-for-profits will have some kind of a preferential rate. Not-for-profits in Con Edison's territory get the same rate as residential customers, which means they pay the lowest rate, lower than any other corporation or commercial entity. And speaking as a executive director of a not-for-profit, we like to pay less too. But at this point in time, there hasn't been any movement either in the legislature or in the advocate communities or in the statewide non-for-profits to try and work this out. If that's something that the legislature wants us to do, we're happy to take this up in our rate cases, because we're in all of them. And we're happy to advocate that on behalf of not-for-profits working with low and fixed income people.
Thank you. So this person is asking about the movement to electric cars, which I am a supporter of, but they're concerned that people who are plugging in their cars are somehow driving up everybody else's electric bills. Now, my understanding was pretty much anywhere you're plugging in your electric car, it's either your own private meter, in which case you would pay the electric cost, or it's at some parking location where they're charging you to plug into their meter. So is it your understanding also that pretty much people with electric cars are having to pay for the electricity?
So you and your constituent are both right.
Okay.
Which is you pay for your own electric bill. If you have at home, I live in an apartment, I don't have a home charger. So I charge out on the street wherever the for-profit charging stations are, and I pay at all of them. The place where your constituents comment about increasing electric costs is you have to build new high efficiency infrastructure to run the charging stations. And that's quite expensive. And PULP has opposed the payments for what are called make ready for charging investments. We've opposed that coming out of ratepayer pockets, because we thought that the money that the state of New York received from the diesel criminality situation at Volkswagen, which was done in other states, should be spent to push forward the electric charging. And so we fought against that. In New York City, we only supported the idea that all trucks and public transit and school buses should be electrified, and that the city collectively should pay for that. That is, the citizens. We don't think that most citizens should pay for electric cars for other people. And I say that as someone who owns an electric car.
Okay, if a government home energy audit results in a recommendation for storm window installation to conserve energy lost from leaky windows, would this be funded if a co-op building allows such installation but requires a vetted private contractor install the windows? I'm not sure. So I guess, are they asking if Con Ed would pay for the window installation or somebody else?
Not
There
really
is a program.
certain.
Okay.
There are many programs for low and moderate income New Yorkers to receive financing, either grants or low cost financing for moderate income people above the 165% of the poverty line level. And those come from NYSERDA mostly, or they come from other state agencies, but they will either pay or will loan you the money below market rate to put those things in. Usually there's a list of contractors that NYSERDA trusts. So your building may need to use from that list. NYSERDA is continually updating this program. They actually changed it so that now, as opposed to just individual income, if you're within and I forgot what the distance is, I think it's like a quarter mile of a low income neighborhood, which is pretty much all of New York City, you are zip code eligible for the NYSERDA below market financing, because we need to move forward on energy efficiency and weatherization as fast as we can to meet our climate change goals in New York. The biggest problem that you'll have is that your tax assessment will probably go up. And if you are living in a rental building, not a co-op building, it can be treated, the law still hasn't changed, it can be treated as a major capital improvement and your rent can go up forever. And we have opposed that sort of thing. And we've talked to the legislature in the past, and my guess is that, in the next couple of rounds as the legislature continues to hone its approach to what we need to do for CLCPA and Local Law 97 and all these other very ambitious and important moves forward on climate that the state and the city are doing, that's something that'll be picked up too, because you shouldn't be unable to afford the rent of your apartment building in the future if you're rent stabilized, rent controlled, or affordable housing, just because you're trying to meet the goal in all good faith that we, the people of the state of New York, and our elected officials have set.
Well, we have actually hit just exactly the time we have to say goodnight. Of course, there were questions we didn't get to, but we covered an enormous amount of territory, and your presentations were fantastic. So I want to thank you both for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge with my constituents. And I want to thank everybody who's participating. And again, you'll get information and follow up, and you know how to find me and my staff. And you also have all kinds of access now to the PULP contact information. So thank you all for being with us tonight. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.